Paris, June 1940. The sound of boots on cobblestone rattles through the heart of the city. German troops march down the Champs-Élysées, black uniforms gleaming, their banners hanging like shadows across the Arc de Triomphe. For Parisians watching from shuttered windows, it is humiliation made flesh. The city of light has fallen, and in its salons, boulevards and hotels, a new reality unfolds. You either survive by bowing to power, or you are crushed beneath it. At 31 Rue Cambon, across from the Ritz Hotel, the boutique of Gabrielle Coco Chanel is closed. Mannequins stand frozen in her signature suits, their painted eyes staring at empty streets. The once buzzing atelier is silent. Yet inside the Ritz just across the way, Chanel is very much alive, living among the conquerors. While Paris groans under occupation, Chanel dines and sleeps in the same hotel as high-ranking Nazi officers, her name whispered with curiosity, envy and suspicion. The woman who once freed women from corsets now frees herself from wartime hunger and hardship. She does it not with thread and fabric, but with proximity to power. She does it with a German lover. This is the paradox of Coco Chanel, orphan and empress, visionary and opportunist, survivor and collaborator. She remains one of the most idolized figures in fashion, a woman whose perfume became the scent of modernity and whose clothes reshaped the silhouette of women everywhere. And yet, in the shadow of war, her legacy is haunted. Did she sell out her Jewish business partners to the Nazis out of greed? Was her relationship with Baron Hans Günther von Dinklage a romance, a survival tactic, or both? Did she use her connections to aid the Reich, or did she secretly play a double game, shielded by her friendship with Winston Churchill? To understand her, you have to strip away the mythology, the perfect black dress, the elegance of Chanel No. 5, and return to the girl who once sat in a convent dormitory, stitching her future with needle and thread. Gabrielle Chanel was born in 1883 in Saumur, France, the daughter of a traveling peddler and a laundrywoman. Her childhood was one of instability, marked not by luxury, but by absence. When her mother died of tuberculosis, her father abandoned the children. Gabrielle, only 12, was sent to the orphanage of Aubazine Abbey, run by nuns whose black and white habits etched themselves into her memory. The convent was cold, harsh, disciplined, but it gave her skills, needlework, sewing, the rhythm of a life ordered by ritual. More importantly, it gave her an aesthetic, the stark simplicity of black and white, the straight lines of architecture, the beauty of restraint. Decades later, these would emerge in her designs, but as a girl, they were simply survival. She grew into adolescence restless and ambitious. At 18, she left the convent and found work as a seamstress by day and a cabaret singer by night. It was in the smoky cafes of Moulins where she first sang the song Qui a vu Coco dans le Trocadero. Audiences heckled, but the nickname stuck. Gabrielle became Coco. The cabaret gave her more than a name, it gave her access. She met wealthy cavalry officers and industrialists who opened doors she could never have pushed alone. She wasn't conventionally beautiful, but she had something more powerful: presence. Her sharp wit, her refusal to bow, her ability to charm with both silence and words made her unforgettable. Men remembered Coco not as an ornament, but as a force. By her mid-20s, she was the mistress of Etienne Balsan, a wealthy ex-cavalry officer who introduced her to Parisian high society. Through him, she met Arthur Boy Capel, the great love of her life. Capel saw more than a mistress in Chanel. He saw a mind sharp enough to reshape style itself. He financed her first shop in Paris, where she began selling hats. It was a modest beginning, but Chanel's vision was radical. She stripped women of feathers and frills, replacing them with simplicity and elegance. She introduced jersey fabric, previously used for men's underwear, into women's fashion, turning comfort into chic. She declared that elegance lay in restraint, not excess. And women listened. By the 1920s, Chanel was an empire. she launched the little black dress which became the uniform of modern femininity. She created Chanel No. 5, the first synthetic perfume, breaking away from floral simplicity to invent a scent that was complex, bold, unforgettable. Marilyn Monroe would later claim she wore nothing else to bed. Coco's empire stretched from couture to fragrance, from Paris to Hollywood. She was no longer the convent orphan, she was the arbiter of modern style. But power breeds resentment. The Wertheimer brothers, Pierre and Paul, Jewish businessmen, had invested in Chanel No. 5 in 1924, striking a deal that left Coco with only 10% of the profits. She considered herself cheated, enraged that outsiders controlled the crown jewel of her empire. Her hatred for the Wertheimers would fester for decades, lying in wait until war gave her a chance for revenge. Paris under occupation. June 1940. France collapsed under Hitler's blitzkrieg. German troops occupied Paris without resistance, and life shifted overnight. Blackouts, food shortages, curfews. French men deported as forced laborers. Jews hunted and marked. The city of Chanel became a city of fear. Most fashion houses shuttered. The world of glamour felt obscene in a starving city. But Chanel, ever pragmatic, closed her boutique. She declared that fashion had no place during wartime. In truth, she had another strategy. She moved into the Ritz Hotel, then as now, a palace of luxury. The Ritz was also the headquarters of the German High Command. There, among champagne and silk sheets, Chanel entered a relationship with Baron Hans Günther von Dinklage, a German officer and intelligence agent. Tall, elegant, and well-connected, Dinklage gave Chanel more than companionship. He gave her protection. While Parisians starved on rations of black bread and cabbage, Chanel dined in Ritz salons lit by crystal chandeliers. She lived in occupied Paris not as a victim, but as someone who understood the currency of survival. Align yourself with power. But her choices were not only about survival, the war gave her an opportunity. With the Nazis enforcing Aryanization laws, stripping Jews of their property, Chanel saw a chance to reclaim Chanel No. 5 from the Wertheimers. She filed claims declaring herself the rightful owner, arguing that as Aryan, she should control the company. What she did not know was that the Wertheimers had outmaneuvered her. Before fleeing France, they had transferred control of the business to a non-Jewish associate. Chanel's scheme failed. Worse, it revealed her willingness to exploit anti-Semitic laws for profit. It was an act her defenders would later struggle to excuse. At the same time, her presence at the Ritz and her relationship with Dinklage drew suspicion. Was she merely opportunistic, or did her ties run deeper? French resistance members whispered that Chanel had become a collaborator, her glamour masking betrayal. And yet there was another thread. Some claimed that Chanel's friendship with Winston Churchill offered her a strange immunity, that her relationship with Dinklage was part of a broader intelligence game, her position at the Ritz making her a channel between German officers and British contacts. The rumors swirled. Was Coco Chanel a collaborator, a survivor, or a spy? For all of Chanel's talk about simplicity and elegance, there was nothing simple about her ambition. She wanted control, total control, over the empire she had built from nothing. And in wartime Paris, she saw a chance to take it. Her obsession was Chanel No. 5. The perfume had become not just her signature, but the most successful fragrance in the world. Women across Europe and America wore it, even in wartime, even in ration lines. But Coco herself had little ownership of it. In 1924, when she partnered with the Wertheimer brothers to bring her perfume to mass production, she had signed away 70% of the profits in exchange for their financing and distribution. It had seemed like a practical deal at the time. By the 1930s, it gnawed at her. By 1940, it enraged her. And now the Nazis gave her a weapon, Aryanization. Under German racial laws, Jews were stripped of businesses and property, their assets transferred into Aryan hands. For Coco, it was an opportunity. She moved to seize Chanel No. 5 back from Pierre and Paul Wertheimer, filing petitions to German authorities declaring herself the rightful owner, citing her Aryan purity. It was a cold maneuver and one of the darkest stains on her legacy. Whether born of greed, resentment, or vengeance, it was collaboration cloaked in paperwork. But Coco had underestimated the Wertheimers. They were clever, worldly, and far from naive. Before fleeing France for the United States, they had transferred control of their company to a trusted non-Jewish businessman, Felix Amiot. When Coco's claims landed on Nazi desks, the Wertheimers' foresight blocked her. They had outplayed her. To some, it looked like poetic justice. The woman who had tried to exploit anti-Semitic laws was foiled by her own greed. To others, it looked like evidence of her ruthlessness. Was it survival, opportunism, or simply the kind of business instinct she had always possessed, sharpened now by war? This betrayal, the attempt to strip her Jewish partners of their empire, would follow her forever. Even as she later rebuilt her fashion house, even as Chanel No. 5 became a symbol of luxury, this moment lingered like a stain on silk. Life at the Ritz was a strange theatre. The Grand Hotel became both prison and palace, filled with German officers, French collaborators, and the occasional celebrity who played along to survive. Coco fit seamlessly into the scene. She was elegant, witty, and above all, adaptable. Her lover, Baron Hans Günther von Dinklag, was no ordinary officer. He was German intelligence, a man with connections to the highest ranks of the Reich. With him, Coco found both protection and access. At the Ritz, she was no longer an outsider. She was at the center of power. Guests whispered. Was Chanel merely keeping herself comfortable, or was she part of something larger? Rumors surfaced that she had been recruited by German intelligence under the code name Westminster, a nod, perhaps, to her ties with Winston Churchill, with whom she had cultivated a strange and lasting friendship through her earlier affair with the Duke of Westminster. The image is almost surreal. Coco Chanel, the high priestess of fashion, moving like smoke between champagne glasses and secret files, her perfume mingling with the tobacco haze of German officers. The most intriguing claim about Coco Chanel's wartime activities comes from Operation Modelhood, Model Hat. The mission, hatched in 1943, was an audacious plan by the Nazis to use Chanel's connections to broker peace between Germany and Britain. The idea was this: Chanel, with her intimate ties to Churchill and the British aristocracy, would serve as a go-between, delivering German proposals to British ears. Whether she did this willingly or was manipulated by Dinklage is still debated, but the records suggest she travelled to Madrid, carrying letters and whispers meant for the British. Here, her story slips into the shadows. Was she genuinely serving German intelligence, trying to aid the Reich? Or was she, as some defenders claim, angling to place herself in a position where she could later argue she had been helping the Allies all along? The ambiguity is maddening and deliberate. Chanel was many things, but above all, she was a survivor. She knew how to leave doors open, how to let truth blur with rumor. If the Reich triumphed, she could claim loyalty. If the Allies returned, she could argue she had been their secret agent all along. And there was Winston Churchill. Their friendship was real, even if its depth is difficult to measure. He admired her independence, her wit, her defiance of convention. Some even suggest he shielded her after the war, protecting her from harsher consequences when France turned on its collaborators. When Paris was liberated in 1944, the city turned on those who had embraced the Germans. Collaborators were beaten in the streets, women had their heads shaved, businessmen were dragged into courts. Chanel, living at the Ritz with her German lover, was an obvious target. She was summoned for questioning. In another time, in another case, she might have faced a tribunal or worse, but Coco walked free. No charges, no trial, just silence. Why? Some say it was lack of evidence, others say it was Churchill's intervention, a quiet phone call that saved her from disgrace. She fled to Switzerland with Dinklage, living in comfortable exile, her name tarnished, but her fortune intact. It was a breathtaking escape, one only Coco could have managed. The same woman who rose from convent orphan to fashion queen had once again survived the collapse of a world. When the war ended, Paris turned into a tribunal of the streets. Collaborators were punished brutally and publicly. Men were shot. Women had their heads shaved, paraded in shame, jeered by crowds who screamed traitor. Chanel should have been among them. Her years at the Ritz, her Nazi lover, her Aryanization petitions, all of it made her a perfect target. But Coco was untouchable. She fled to Switzerland in late 1944, accompanied by Hans von Dinklage. They lived in Lausanne, tucked away in Alpine hotels and lakeside villas. She wore pearls, smoked endlessly, and kept to her circle of exiled aristocrats, financiers, and former collaborators who had all chosen neutrality over reckoning. For nearly a decade, Chanel stayed in Switzerland. She wasn't banished by law, she was banished by opinion. Paris didn't want her. The fashion world whispered, but it didn't forget. Chanel remained a name, if not a presence. During those years, she lived quietly wealthy, surviving on her perfume royalties. The Wertheimer brothers, the very men she had tried to dispossess under Nazi law, had regained control of the company and continued to make Chanel No. 5 the most famous fragrance in the world. Ironically, their financial empire ensured that Coco, sitting in Swiss cafes, sipping brandy and chain-smoking, never wanted for money. She lived off the wealth of the very family she had betrayed. It was almost biblical, the betrayer surviving by the grace of the betrayed. By the early 1950s, Paris had changed. Dior had taken the crown of couture with his new look, hourglass waists, full skirts, a return to opulence. It was everything Chanel had once fought against. Women who had been freed by her sleek suits and jersey dresses were once again bound in layers of fabric, cinched and posed. Coco, from her exile, watched in disgust. And then she did what she had always done. She fought back. In 1954, at the age of 71, Chanel returned to Paris. Her comeback collection was unveiled to mixed reviews. Critics sneered, the war, her scandals, her age. Surely she was finished. But women thought differently. They saw her slim suits, her straight skirts, her cardigan jackets trimmed with braid, and they recognized freedom. The post-war generation embraced her designs with the same hunger their mothers had felt in the 1920s. She became, once again, the queen of modern style. The Wertheimer brothers, in a twist of fate, financed her return. They bankrolled her fashion house, making her not just solvent but powerful once more. She had tried to steal Chanel No. 5 from them, and now they gave her the empire back, because business was business, and business meant Coco Chanel. It was a kind of absolution, but not one of morality. It was absolution in silk, pearls, and perfume. Coco spent her final years at the Ritz, the same hotel where she had lived during the occupation. By the 1960s, the shadows of collaboration had dimmed, time had blurred, fashion had forgiven, and the world preferred to remember Chanel not as a woman with a Nazi lover, but as the eternal empress of elegance. In photographs from the period, she sits in her signature tweed suits, a double string of pearls at her throat, cigarette in hand. She looks timeless, untouchable, as if scandal could never stick to silk. On January 10, 1971, Coco Chanel died in her suite at the Ritz. Her last words, spoken to her maid as she prepared for bed, were simple. "You see, this is how you die." The city mourned. Her funeral at the Church of the Madeleine was filled with mourners dressed in her black and white palette. Her models, wearing Chanel suits, sat in the front pews. The Wertheimer family, the perfume magnates she had once betrayed, carried her legacy forward. Coco Chanel's life is a paradox, wrapped in silk and stitched with scandal. She was born poor, abandoned and orphaned. She clawed her way into salons, reinvented herself with wit and charm, and revolutionized fashion. She freed women from corsets, gave them perfume that smelled like power, and declared that elegance was rebellion. And yet, during the darkest years of France, she chose to survive, not by resistance, but by proximity to power. She lived with Nazis, tried to use their racial laws for profit, and aligned herself with a regime that crushed millions. Her defenders argue she was a survivor, that that she maneuvered within impossible circumstances, that her friendship with Churchill proves she was playing both sides. Her critics call her a collaborator, an opportunist who dressed betrayal in couture. Both are true. Chanel was not saint or monster. She was a woman who understood, more than most, that power is not given, it is taken. That survival requires compromise, that reputation can be reinvented just as a dress can. Today, every time someone sprays Chanel number 5, they are participating in her paradox. The scent is glamour, power, femininity, but it is also history. A reminder that even the most iconic figures are human, flawed, compromised. Coco Chanel didn't bow, she adapted, she charmed, she schemed, and in doing so she outlived her enemies, outlasted her scandals, and reigned as the queen of fashion long after the war had ended. Her story leaves us with a haunting question. When survival collides with morality, what do we choose? And more importantly, what will history choose to remember? As the shadows lengthen and the stars begin to whisper, we close the pages of this ancient tale. In the hush of night, truth rests where faith once stood strong. Sleep gently now, wrapped in the echoes of empires long gone. Until next time, when darkness falls and another lullaby of a fallen world begins.